Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Governor Christie.
Hey, all right. Thanks for coming. See ya.
Good to see you.
Mark, how are you? Read the sons of us.
Oh, from New Jersey.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Hello, Governor.
Thank you for coming. Got away.
Hi there.
All right.
How you doing?
Thanks for coming.
Yep.
Yes, God, good to meet you.
Welcome back.
Good to be back.
Hi there.
Oh,
okay, good job with the debate. Good job.
Yeah, brother. How are you?
How you doing? Nice to meet you.
Well, thank you. All right, all right. Thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome on a cold night. I feel like it's New Hampshire now. It's for sure. But I will tell you, I came right here from Tuscaloosa on Wednesday night. I was out doing TV in Tuscaloosa at 5:30 a.m. Central Time on Thursday morning, and it was 33 degrees in Tuscaloosa. I said, what the heck is wrong with this place? I thought it was supposed to be warm down here. We actually, our plane couldn't take off because it was iced, and they have no de-icing at the Tuscaloosa airport because they never need it. So we took a while to finally take off and get up here, but we've been here ever since the debate was over on Wednesday night. And I know I always get that kind of reaction when I walk into a room in New Hampshire when I bring Mary Pat with me. So Mary Pat, stand up and say hello to everybody. I told her 2 weeks ago when I came without her that I got introduced into the room and people started to clap and look around, and then they were shaking my hand, they were looking behind me, and there was like an audible groan that she wasn't here. So I'm glad, and I think for the next 7 weeks, you'll probably see us both together most of the time when we're coming up here, and this is where we're going to be spending our time. So a couple of things, and we're going to, as we always do in these, we're going to spend our time taking your questions because I want to know what's on your mind and what you're thinking and concerned about, and to give you those answers. I've spent the last day and a half doing a college tour here in New Hampshire. So why? A college tour because we have to get our college students engaged in voting. And what the argument I've been making to them, and I was at Franklin Pierce and at Keene State, I was at New England College, and I was up at UNH today. And the argument I've been making to them is, I'm 61 years old. I mean, the decisions I would make as president affect their lives much more than it's going to affect mine. I know much more of my life is in the rearview mirror than through the windshield. And the decisions we make, the next president make, is going to affect them and their lives much more than it's going to affect my life. And so they should be involved in making that decision. And if you have the luxury of being a college student in New Hampshire, man, change your registration and vote up here. I don't care what of the other 49 states you're in, your vote is much more important here, much more impactful here than it would be any place else in the country. You're first, and first will make this field even smaller than it is now. And you'll probably get very few decisions to make late in the later states. So you want to try to make this race different than what it is right now. This is the place to do it. So I know that a lot of folks from my party don't go to college campuses because they get nervous to go to college campuses. Let me tell you why I don't. Because I'm from New Jersey. I'm a Republican from New Jersey. I mean, I get nervous leaving the driveway as a Republican from New Jersey in the morning. So coming and going to a college campus is not that big a deal. And in fact, when I was yesterday at Keene, there was a guy sitting like right where you are, and young man, college student, he had on a MAGA hat and a t-shirt with Trump's mugshot on it. And so, and he's sitting there and he's not smiling or anything. And so third, I didn't want to go first to him, but third, I went to him. And he came up and he had a very good question about, he's studying to be a teacher He wants to teach social studies in high school. And he had a real good question about, how do we deal with the deficits we're seeing in K-12 education? Kids not being able to read at grade level, kids not being able to do math at grade level. What can we do to change the educational system that he wants to be a part of? So after the town hall was over, I was shaking hands with folks, and he came up and he said, "I can't believe you called on me." He said, I'm wearing this hat and I'm wearing this shirt, and I can't believe you called on me. And I said, look, you misunderstand something. I don't hate Trump voters. I was a Trump voter. I voted for Trump. This is not some kind of disease or something that I'm worried about catching. We have to have a conversation amongst ourselves inside the Republican Party about what we want our party to be in the future and what we want our country to be. And if we don't have that conversation with everybody, including a Trump voter who's at a town hall of mine, then what right do I have to be president? Because I want to be the president that brings this country together finally. The thing I see the most as I've traveled around, I've seen people's anger and their frustration, but more than anything else, I've felt their exhaustion. This whole political scene exhausts them. And that exhaustion leads to one of two reactions: isolation, where they say, to hell with it, I'm not going to be involved in it anymore, I don't care, I'm not going to vote, I'm not going to get involved. Or the exhaustion leads to despair. And both of those are emotions that are not good for our country. They're just not. But a lot of politicians see those emotions and they can feed off of them and play into it. And that's what Trump's doing. And that's what DeSantis is doing, in my opinion. I want you to understand something. We talked about an issue Wednesday night about transgenderism. And look, I said I'm 61. I don't understand a lot of it. I mean, on a basic level, I understand what it is. I can't relate to it. I really can't. But I don't want to take advantage of it politically either and make people feel like this is a rampaging, raging problem in America. In 2021, do you know how many instances there were of minors getting sex transformation surgery in the country? 337 in a country of 330 million people. And how much time did we spend on the stage on Wednesday night arguing about that? Right? It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. If you listen to Ron DeSantis, you would think there is an epidemic of this going on across the country, and he's the new sheriff in town who's gonna stop it from happening, right? I mean, come on already. Let me be really clear about my position. I trust parents. I trust parents. First, because I was raised by two good ones. And my mom and dad taught me the values that I still live with today. Maybe I've changed them around the edges a little bit because I have a new influence on my parenting philosophy. But I trust parents because I had two good parents, and I was fortunate to have two really good, loving, available, attentive parents. I trust parents because I am one with Mary Pat, and we have four, luckily, wonderful children, healthy, strong, and still every once in a while care to see us. So that's good. One of them showed up at the debate on Wednesday night. That was good. If you get at least one of them, you're like, all right, one of them's willing to come. That's really good. The debate before that, we had all four. Now, let me tell you why. The debate Wednesday night, as you know, was in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. The debate before was in Miami, Florida. For some reason, all four of them found the time to come down and be supportive of a dad when the debate was in Miami, Florida, and they were staying in a hotel in South Beach, right? So They're so generous. They really love me so much. I trust parents. And so look, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this issue tonight unless you all ask questions about it and then I'll answer them. But I want you to understand what my position is on this. I would hope and pray that none of our 4 children would have to go through that, because it's got to be an awfully difficult thing for them. And it would be horribly difficult for us. But if that situation would confront anybody in this room, what business do I have telling you what's best for your child? You see these jokers in Congress. It takes them 3 weeks to pick a speaker in our own party. They held up 400 military promotions earned by the men and women in the military for politics. We want to turn these kind of life issues over to them to decide? I don't. And so let's make sure that in the live free or die state, we stand by that. Are we going to have some irresponsible parents who are going to do some bad things? Of course we are. We have that now. We have parents who engage in all kinds of bad conduct. We have law enforcement to prevent the very worst things from happening, or to hold people responsible if they do. But we shouldn't be having government, in my opinion, getting that involved in our lives. And because believe me, even if you're on the other side of this issue from me and you think there should be some law outlawing it or whatever, be careful. Because I'll give you this last example. Because Megyn Kelly screwed this up in the debate on Wednesday night. She was saying that I signed some law that prevented schools from telling their parents if their children were confused about their gender. And I told her, that's wrong. I didn't sign that law. It was the next guy who signed that law. And she's shaking her head. Well, now both the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal have done a fact check and said, Megyn Kelly was wrong. Okay? I didn't sign that law. The law I signed is consistent with what I just told you, which was that the localities should be able to decide the rules, not the state. But the problem with that is when the next guy got in, he changed it and made the decision at the state level. And here's what the law is now in New Jersey. If your child goes and expresses concern or doubt about his or her gender and tells a teacher or an administrator, the law in New Jersey now prevents the teacher or the administrator from telling the parents about that. Prevents it. Now, that's what I'm worried about when we get into this. But if our daughter, when she was in high school, was in the midst of her menstrual cycle and she had cramps, they couldn't give her 2 Advil without my permission. But if she says, I think I'm a boy, they can't tell me. This is what happens when you let government get in the middle of your family on these kind of things. So let's keep that in mind and let's clear that up tonight about where I am on this and why I believe what I believe. I trust the parents to be involved in making these decisions for their kids before they turn 18. And then once they turn 18, as we know, we turn only to prayer to hope that they make the right decisions. Because after that, it's not totally out of our hands, but a lot of it is. The last thing I'll say to you before we take questions is this, and it's about the debate on Wednesday night. Look, we called the college campus tour direct questions, direct answers. And that was off of what was happening on the debate stage Wednesday night. Now, I had no interest really in being the 4th moderator of the debate on Wednesday night. I really didn't. But since they weren't doing it, someone had to. I mean, this is game time now. You all have to make decisions about what you're going to do. And to do that, we should answer the questions we're asked. Now, I know they teach you in young politicians school that if you don't like the question, answer the one you like. and ignore the one you were asked. I'm a slow learner, obviously, and didn't get that lesson really well in young politicians school. But, where I was raised, in the state where I was raised, that would not be tolerated. If you get asked a question and you try not to answer it, people yell at you and then they smack you. And then it really starts to get interesting, right? So I think people need to answer the question that's asked. And I think I did on every one of them on Wednesday night. If we had a plan that could rescue the hostages from Israel, especially those 8 Americans, would I send special forces in to do it? Yes, I would. If China invades Taiwan, would America under Christie come to the defense of Taiwan? Yes, we would. I mean, you have to answer these questions directly. You have a right to know. Because if you disagree with that, you need to vote for somebody else. Because I'm not going to go down there and change my mind. I'm going to go down there and do what I told you I was going to do. And then they asked the most important question in this race, in my opinion. Is Donald Trump fit or not for office? I'm the only one on the stage who would answer. The only one. He's unfit. It's that simple. Donald Trump is unfit to be president because of his own conduct, his own behavior, not for any other reason. Ron DeSantis, that guy could be a Philly pretzel this week. The way he twisted himself into, right? He lost a couple of miles off his fastball. Father Time is undefeated. I'm sitting 2 people away from him going, he's not serious, right? New sheriff in town who won't answer the question. Answer the question. And that's why I jumped in and said, he's not answering. Make him answer the question. And to Elizabeth Vargas's credit, she went back at him a couple of times. Interrupted him. Is he fit or not? Is he fit or not? Well, a couple miles off the fastball. I'm like, who are we talking about here? Roger Clemens? We're talking about Donald Trump. Look, if they won't answer your questions now, when you give them power, you can be sure they won't. And same thing with Nikki. Now, Nikki's issue is not so much that she won't answer, although she won't answer that question, whether Trump is fit or unfit. Her answer to that was, I think we need to move on from drama and chaos. What you're supposed to conclude from that is, oh yeah, Trump is drama and chaos. We need to move on. I guess that means she's against Trump. But she can say to Trump and Trump supporters, I never said anything bad. I didn't mention your name. That's why I brought up Voldemort for you Harry Potter readers. We all know what we're talking about, right? Right? He who shall not be named. Because if I name him, he might actually appear. Well, let me tell you, that was stupid. It was a debate stage. He'll never appear. He doesn't want to be on that debate stage, and he don't want to defend his record, and he certainly doesn't want to stand there next to me because he knows what'll happen. So Nikki's problem, though, is that, like on the issue of abortion, when she's here in New Hampshire, if any of you have gone to her meetings here, she makes it sound like she wants you to make the choice. I don't want to divide the country anymore. I don't want other people making decisions. I want you making decisions. But then she goes to Iowa. More conservative place than here, at a conservative forum in Iowa, and across from the guy who is the leader of the evangelical community politically in Iowa. And he presses her and keeps pressing her. And she finally says, yes, I would sign a 6-week ban on abortion. 6-week. Which one is it? You guys have a right to know. Let me be clear about where I am. I would not sign any national ban on abortion. And I'm pro-life. But the reason I wouldn't sign a national ban on abortion is because the people should decide this issue, not the politicians. Each state should be able to have their people decide what they want the law to be on this really emotional, difficult issue. It shouldn't be decided in Washington. For 50 years, conservatives said this is unfair. It's being taken away from us by 9 judges in Washington, D.C. We should be able to make the decision for ourselves. So we actually finally win that fight after 50 years. And the Supreme Court says, fine, you decide. And now we got a bunch of people in our party who go, oh, well, okay, now we'll decide here in Washington. Think about what that would be like just as a practical matter in Congress. If Congress made this decision, it could change every 2 years. You could have Nikki Haley as president in a Republican Congress, and they could pass a 6-week ban on abortion. So for 2 years, no abortion anywhere in this country after 6 weeks. Then the Democrats could take over Congress and they could strike it down. And then I assume that President Haley would veto it. Then a new president comes in on the Democratic side and they switch it back to abortion anytime. And that applies to the whole country. And then the Republicans come back in and it switches back. You cannot run a country that way on issues that are that emotional and that personal. You make the call. You make the call in your state. And look, some states will be in one place and some states will be in another. It'll be a patchwork across the country, but so what? In the end, if you feel like you have that in your hands and in your control, I would assume you trust that a heck of a lot more than you trust the people in Washington. And that's my position on it. And that's been my position my whole career, because I really believe in people making this decision on the stuff that's that personal and not politicians. So hopefully when Nikki comes back, she's in Iowa now, but hopefully when she comes back to New Hampshire, someone will ask her and we'll see what she says. But you know that I've been saying the same thing no matter where I am, whether it was Tuscaloosa, Alabama, or Miami, Florida, or here in New Hampshire. I'm going to continue to. And I think that's what you want from a president. You're not going to agree with me on everything. I promise you that. You won't. But you will never, ever have to wonder where I am and what I believe. And then you can make a judgment based on that. And I think if we have that kind of leader in the White House, that's not only good for you, it's good for the rest of the world. People need to know where America stands. And with war in Ukraine and war in Israel, it's more important now than ever to have a president who's strong and resolute and says what he means and means what he says and acts on it. That's the kind of president, if you give me the chance, that I'll be. So now we're gonna go to your questions. Whatever you want, raise up your hand. Look, this is not like some of the other town halls you may have gone to in New Hampshire where my staff comes out beforehand, interviews you, and sees who has the friendliest question and then goes and hands you the microphone. The guy with the MAGA hat is a perfect example of that from yesterday at Keene. So just raise your hand. Someone will come to you with the microphone, only because we're live streaming the event tonight at chrischristie.com. So there's lots of people who are at home in other places around the country who are watching it. And when you don't use a microphone, they can't hear you. And we've gotten those email complaints from folks saying like, I can't hear the question. And so we don't want to get people aggravated. So let's go to the gentleman right in the back there, and she's going to bring you, he's right there. And she's going to bring you a microphone. I'll get to you, don't worry.
Yes, Governor. My name is Dave Quigley from Milford, New Hampshire.
Welcome, Dave.
Thank you very much. Thanks for doing this. The question I have for you is, in terms of entitlements, Nikki Haley has been pretty straightforward with her position on it, Medicare, Social Security. How does your position on it, how is it different or is it the same?
It's pretty much the same from what I can tell. Nikki and I were the two people who I thought talked about it in a pretty straightforward way in the debate in Miami. I think we both have, I've been a little more specific than her, but I think we're both moving in the same direction, which is Social Security is going to be broke in 10 years. And if we get to that point and do nothing, there will be an automatic 24% cut in benefits for every Social Security recipient. And there will be an elimination of certain coverages for Medicare recipients. So we're at a real crisis point here in terms of doing it. So we have to do something, and we have to do something significant. Here's what I would do. First, I would increase the retirement age for people in their 30s and 40s. You can't do it for people in their 50s or 60s. They don't have enough time to adjust to a change in retirement age. But people in their 30s and 40s do. And that will add years to the system because those people, and the reason to do it, and it's not only that we can't afford it, but it's also because those folks are living longer. Remember when Social Security was set up? By the tables, life expectancy for men was 63 years old. And retirement was at 62 for Social Security. So it was a great deal for the government. You paid them the entire time you worked. You could be eligible to collect at 62, and then most people on average died at 63, and that was the end of that, right? Now, life expectancy for men is at a little over 81, and for women is 83. So now you have a system that has to support people for over 20 years on average. And we can't do that anymore. We just can't. Reagan raised the retirement age a bit back in the early 80s, and that sustained the system for 40 years. We need to do the same thing again, have a 40-year solution. Second, I think we have to means test Social Security. And let me be really specific about what that would entail. If you've been really successful in this country, and you've made a lot of money, and you've saved millions of dollars for your retirement, and I mean many millions, not a million or two, many millions for your retirement, why should you get a Social Security check? You don't need it. Now, I had someone at a town hall meeting say, I paid into that system and I want my money. I say to that person, I said to her that night, and I'll say to all of you, there's lots of things you pay for in this country you don't get a direct benefit back for, but it's a good for the country. The example I like to use is food stamps. Now, my wife and I are lucky. We've never had to use food stamps. But there are lots of families in this country that have moments when they need to. And just because I've never used the program doesn't mean I begrudge paying for it. I want people to not have to go to bed hungry in this country. We're the richest, most bountiful country in the world, and I don't think people should go to bed hungry. We never used it. What do I say? I want my money back on that because I never used it? I don't think that makes sense. So, we have to negotiate what the number is. And I'd want experts to tell me what kind of benefit, how long would we lengthen it, for how low we bring it. But we absolutely have to do it. And, I said at one of the debates, I don't know if Warren Buffett is collecting Social Security, but if he is, shame on him. He still hasn't answered me as to whether he is or he isn't, which makes me think he is. Because I think if he wasn't, he would jump up and say, I'm not collecting, I mean, that's the extreme case. But there are lots of other cases where we could stop just paying out of money. And the same thing would apply to Medicare benefits on means testing. Like if you can afford to continue to pay for private insurance to cover your medical needs, then you should. Or you wind up paying a lot more for Medicare, whichever one you wanted to do, but to try to close that gap as well. I wouldn't raise the cap on taxes for Social Security and Medicare right now. And the reason for that is that we're in difficult economic moment here. And that raising of the cap above the $160,000 or so where it is now would directly impact middle-class families in this country in a way that I don't think they could sustain. And so I go to those other two. Now, look, on the stage that night when we're having this conversation, Nikki agreed with me in general on the fact that we need to go after raising the retirement age. And I don't think she was specific on means testing, but she was definitely for raising the retirement age. But what I liked about her answer was she's acknowledging something needs to be done. And I think that's the responsible thing to do. On the stage that night, Tim Scott, Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy all said, no, don't worry about it. We're just going to grow our way out of the problem. Trump says the same thing. Biden says the same thing. Why do you think that is? They're 160 years old combined. The hell do they care? They're going to be gone soon. They don't, and they're neither one of them are going to sustain themselves on Social Security. All they care about is not getting blamed for anything. All they care about is getting elected one more time. Beware of those people. You saw Biden in his State of the Union address last year. The only time he got both sides to stand up and cheer was when he said, we're not going to touch Social Security. Can we all agree on that? And both sides stood up and cheered. And I was sitting with her watching, and I go, a room full of liars and hypocrites. All they care about is just get me through this and the next election so no one can run a negative ad on me about Social Security. And, you deserve better than that. So that's what I would do. And, I use the example all the time. Our oldest is 30. If I tell him that we're increasing the retirement age 3 or 4 years, but he's got 40 years to get ready and he can't, we got bigger problems with him than that. If you got 40 years notice, you should be able to plan based on those 40 years. And so that's what I would do with Social Security. It is irresponsible to say it's going to fix itself. It's not. It's not. And I understand Trump's going to be up here next week. He won't take any questions. But if he did, that should be question 1, because it is irresponsible. And think about if you have friends or family members who live on Social Security and really need it. Imagine if 25% of that benefit went away like that. They'd have to choose between rent and heat and food. They'd have to. And some of them can't survive on what they're getting right now in Social Security. Imagine if 25% of it went away. So it's irresponsible to do it. You can't wait. The next president's going to have to deal with it. Assume the next president has 8 years. We're 10 years away from it right now. You've got to deal with it in the next presidency, and that's the way I'll deal with it. Thanks for your question. Go ahead, buddy. This guy right here.
I've seen Nikki Haley 4 times.
How many times you seen me?
First,
What the hell are you doing?
I seen Doug Burgum last week.
Okay, wait a second. You see Doug Burgum is now out of the race, and it's the first time you're seeing me? I can't believe I called on you. Go ahead. Go ahead. Ask your question.
And I'm going to see Vivek Ramaswamy the December 10th and Donald Trump the 16th.
Okay.
So my question is, I'm going to ask them the same exact question. The question is, what are your plans for president?
It's a good question. And you'll get to ask every one of them that question, probably except for Donald Trump, because he doesn't take questions. But all the rest of them have answered you, and I'm going to answer you now. Look, first thing that we need to do, that I would do as president, is sign an executive order to send the National Guard to the border. Our Customs and Border Patrol officers at the southern border are overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed by 200,000 illegal entries a month of people trying to get into the country. There's not enough of them to control it. So we need to send National Guard down there to help them. And I'll then hire more Customs and Border Patrol officers that I'll put out there over the next year as they get trained and deployed, so we can bring the National Guard folks back home. That's one of the things I do on day one. Second, I would take our budget, where we're spending much too much money, and I would return us immediately to pre-COVID spending. That would save $1 trillion on what we're spending right now. $1 trillion, it's a lot. And then we have to continue to reduce our spending because we spend much too much money and we're wasting your time, your money. Yeah. For student loans, 4.8 billion. Well, we're paying for it. Of course we are. So that's why we have to return all that spending to pre-COVID spending and continue to reduce spending as we go forward, because we have $33 trillion in debt that we're leaving you. I'm not going to pay that debt. You are. And your kids are, if you can imagine that someday you'll have kids, right? So that's a problem. Third, we've got to make sure that the rest of the world knows we're not going to let them pick on our friends. We made a promise to protect Ukraine 30 years ago. Russia's doing it. We got to keep our promise. Israel's our best friend in the Middle East, and they're the only democracy. They got invaded by a terrorist group. 1,400 of their people were killed. We need to make sure Israel has all the weapons they need to protect themselves, and they need to have American support. And with me, they would. And if we do those two things, well, the Chinese will know if they try to take off after Taiwan, they shouldn't mess with us. Fourth thing I'd say to you is we've got to improve your educational system for you. 39% of our eighth graders don't read at grade level. 25% of our eighth graders don't do math at grade level. I want you to be the very best you can be. I want you to reach the fullest potential you have that God gave to you. And we're not doing that with our educational system across the whole country. And so I want your parents to have choice about where to send you to school. I want them to send you to the best school for you. And if they don't have the money to do it, instead of spending all this money that we're spending, having a Department of Education in Washington, D.C., we should take all that money and send it to states that allow parents to choose and let them use that money to choose. Because back to what I was saying before, parents have the best interest of kids and they know their kids the best, and that applies to education too. And I could go on and on. I'll give you one more. Fifth, I would say to you that we have to bring our country back together again. There is too much anger. People can't even talk to each other anymore. They can't have a civil conversation about the issues that really matter. And it's because a president, you know, President Trump in particular, but President Obama did this as well. And President Biden's doing it by just ignoring things. It lets people get angrier and angrier to the point where you can't even have a conversation around your dining room table with friends or family about politics because everybody gets too angry and too emotional. And that's not what it should be. And a president has to remind everybody that Americans have much more in common than we have differences. And that we are still the country that everybody in the world wants to come to. And we should appreciate it a lot more. And I'm going to spend a lot of time as president reminding my fellow Americans what a gift it is to be an American. When we were born here, every one of us was gifted it. You were too. You could have been born anywhere. You were born here. And that makes you amongst the freest people the world's ever known. I will thank him. Make sure you do too. And that's the chance that I want you to remember about every day, to motivate yourself to make the most of yourself that you possibly can be. And a president can help to do that. But you got to talk about it all the time and remind people. Not remind them about the differences. Not talk to them about who you shouldn't like, who you should resent. But talk to you about the fact that the fellow Americans that you have around you every day in your school, in your neighborhood, and in this country are amongst the greatest people the world's ever known. And you're pretty lucky to be here in one of the safest, strongest, freest places the world's ever seen. And I think if we start reminding people of that again, we'll lower the anger a little bit and get people to be working together. And when America works together, nobody beats us. Only time we lose is when we're divided inside ourselves. So those are the things I would do as president. And I hope you get a chance to ask all of them questions and wave your arms at Trump. Maybe he might answer your question too, okay? Thank you. Thanks for your question. And thanks for coming tonight. All right. Let's go to the guy right in the back. Sorry.
How you doing, Governor? My name is Nick, and I'm here from Lebanon. Bit of a drive, but Democratic. No, thank you kindly. It's a Democratic stronghold up there, but I ran as an independent. And I got a quarter of the vote, so I was very happy about that. So I think there is hope for some unity, is what I'm trying to get at. My question is, when you're up on the debate stage, and this doesn't apply to you necessarily, but more the other three, do the other three or you at some point feel like this is just an interview for Trump's eventual running mate pick? Because I'm trying to think, like, what's
not for me,
not for you. No, of course not.
I think I don't know if anyone's lower on the list than me, but they'd have to work at it.
More of the other ones, like, because you have this thing of like, what are we really doing here, right? So what do you think they're doing there? Do you think they're just there to interview publicly to be Trump's running mate?
I'll answer as to each one of them individually because the answer is different as to each one of them.
Okay.
Vivek is definitely interviewing to be the running mate or the Secretary of Commerce or something like that. He doesn't believe that at 38 years old he's going to be president of the United States. But all of a sudden now everybody knows him. Not many people knew him before all this. Now lots of people know him. I think he's definitely interviewing. I don't think Ron DeSantis is interviewing. I don't think he wants to be Trump's vice president. I don't think he's a vice president personality. I think he's interviewing for 2028. Because if Trump's the nominee, if he wins, he can't run again. If he loses, he probably won't run again. So 2028 looks pretty wide open, and Ron's 45 years old. So I think he's interviewing for next time. Nikki, I think, is a twofer. If she got offered vice president, I think she'd take it. But if she doesn't, that's okay too, because she's 54 and she could run again the next time. The thing that presents a problem for me about that is, why would we turn over the next 4 years of this country to either Donald Trump or Joe Biden? And there's an urgency to now. And this shouldn't be about each one of them. It should be about you. Look, no one was begging me to run this time. I've had times when people were begging me to run, and I didn't. I ran this time because I looked at the field and I said, none of these people are going to take him on. No one's going to tell the truth about him. And I know him for 22 years. And I have an obligation to go out there and tell the truth about him. And that's the thing that motivated me and got me over the finish line to run. And so, I think the problem with my opponents in this race is that they have their own personal agenda. If not first, co-first or a close second. And I think when you're running for president of the United States, if you really want to do the job the right way, you got to put your own ambitions second. Now, if you win, a lot of good things come with that. But still, once you're president, you have to put the people first. And I said that in my closing statement the other night, that I'll have the humility to be the kind of president who understands that I work for you, not the other way around. Can we turn it back on?
Very briefly, I have a friend in New Jersey who's watching the live stream, a fellow Seton Hall graduate named Ian. I told him I'd say, he says hi from New Jersey.
All right. Shout out to the live stream, Ian. Very good. You did your job. In the back, sir.
I know you're here to hear our difficulties, our challenges. And after you leave here, and if you become president, I don't know if it's going to make a difference, but I'm going to tell you my story, what I'm dealing with. My wife, we've been married for 39 years. I met her when she was 22 years old. Wonderful, wonderful woman. She's a civil engineer, and I work law enforcement, and I raised 4 children. One's a doctor, one made it as far as a COO, and the other 2 college graduate. And I have a boat, nice cars, big house, and I'm an artist, and we added a studio to my house so I could paint. So 7 years ago, she was, at age of 55, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And I hope I can get through this. And that was a big nightmare. And then, of course, we navigated through COVID. That was another nightmare. But the worst one I didn't expect was dealing with the government and Medicaid. And I know we talked about Medicare earlier. Medicaid is incredible. And you're dealing with the state, and you're dealing with an agency that is walled up behind a fortress. You don't ever talk to anybody. They have so many firewalls. All they do is send you letters saying, this is our decision. This is not our decision. So the only way you get to talk to somebody is if you hire a lawyer. So you got more money going down the drain, and this is the lawyer I talked to. So the problem is, there's a provision within Medicaid that they give you. They say, okay, if you make a certain amount of money, there's a threshold, then they give you access to your spouse's money. You can use some of it, for your expenses. Well, guess what? I don't qualify because I make more than $3,500 a month. And that's an incredible number. When I heard it, I says, how do you live on $3,500 a month? I know you couldn't.
Nope.
And I know most people here probably wouldn't be able to do it. So, but it's overnight. So overnight, I go from living in a house that 68 degrees, 69 degrees, and I have to turn the thermostat down to 63, and I have to wear, a coat or a jacket because I'm terrified of the oil truck coming up and pumping oil into my tank because that's $500.
That's right.
So the problem is they need to either adjust that threshold because that $3,500 just happens to be where the middle class begins. And then the middle class ends, I think it begins at $42,000 a year and it ends at $122,000. And the middle class in this country is 52% of the population. So basically they're squeezing the population. And guess what? Above 122,000 is 6% of the country. Only 6% of the country earns $122,000 and above. And when you get into higher than that, 2% own 92% of the wealth. And so they don't need to deal with Medicaid. They don't need to deal with public nursing home. They can send their spouses to private nursing homes, watch the sunset somewhere. So that's the problem. And the other thing they could do is probably give you a grace period. Say, okay, we'll give you 6 months to put your affairs, in order, because I have to sell my house because I can't afford to stay there because it took both of our income to stay there. So there goes my studio that I worked so hard for. You shouldn't work all your life because it's too late now for me to start over. You shouldn't have to work all your life and then have to lose your wealth because your spouse gets a terminal illness. And $12,000 a month, that's the total cost. And what you're getting for it is a nursing home that's incredible, incredibly challenging. I mean, it's the worst thing you've seen on earth. And I don't mean to blame the staff because they're doing their best, but it's just that the resources are not there. I mean, I go to the place, 2-3 times a week just to take her out of there and then take her shopping if I'm doing something. They don't have the medical staff. They don't have, they don't have the dental care. They don't have anything. And then they take all her money. So now I'm supposed to fill in whatever she doesn't have, which is an incredible situation. So I know you can't do something about that directly because the state, oversees the Medicaid, funding and how they give it out and all that. But I want to get your sentiment on it. And I think maybe you can, with your leadership, maybe something can be done because it's something that's going to affect most people in here. I don't know, some people probably here would put their spouses in private nursing home. I can't. But I think most of the population, if you take the 50% in the middle class and you take the 36% below that, that's what, 90-something percent will have to deal with that issue.
Yep. Well, yeah, please. So a couple of things. The first thing is that you're right on Medicaid that the state controls half of it. The feds control the other half, right? So the rules get set not only by the state, but by the federal government as well. And so like when I was a governor, I could set certain rules in my state, particular to my state, but they couldn't go below certain federal standards that were set. So a president can, with Congress, do something about changing that. And the income threshold is one of the things you can change. And it seems to me that given the inflation we've had over the last 4 years, those numbers need to change. Because when we're in inflation that was at 1% or 2%, it's easier to deal with. But now that you're dealing with food that's more expensive, home heating oil, gasoline, everything that you need to do in your life is more expensive, yet the cap is staying where the threshold is staying where it is. So one of the things I would definitely try to do as president is work with Congress to get the threshold lifted, because I know from in my own state, those numbers are really hard. Like in a state like New Jersey, which is even more expensive than here in New Hampshire to live in, those numbers, in our state, someone who makes $200,000 a year is middle class. That's a school teacher and a police officer at the top of their game. will each make $100,000 in a place like New Jersey. So 200,000, they run into that kind of problem that you just talked about, they would be in the exact same situation you're in or worse because of the expenses in our state. So we can do something about that. Secondly, we have to address the issue of long-term health care, end of life health care. And we haven't addressed it in this country in an effective way. And because Alzheimer's has become such an epidemic in this country for folks at a younger and younger age, your wife at 55 years old is the youngest that I've personally heard about, but it's happening at younger and younger ages, and it is debilitating. You know, my mom died 20 years ago, and my dad got remarried, and his wife has Alzheimer's, and they've gone through the same kind of thing you're talking about. My dad's 90 years old now, and for a long time, he didn't have her go to a nursing home because of all those problems, and he was taking care of himself, and you know, because I'm sure you went through a period of that, I thought it was going to kill him because it's 24 hours a day, and he wasn't eating himself. He wasn't taking care of himself, and he was doing all that out of love for her. And I said, you know, there comes a point here, Dad, where you have to take care of yourself now too, because, you know, she doesn't even, at that point, she didn't know who he was or oftentimes where she was. And it was breaking his heart on top of killing him physically. And you've lived that. We need to address this problem in our country because it's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse. And so as we look at programs like Medicaid and Medicare, we have to reconfigure some of this for dealing with long-term care. Because if we don't, we're going to have situations like this. And ultimately, the government winds up paying something anyway. But in the meantime, what we do is we wreck the lives of the survivors. And so you're dealing with, and like I said, I can relate to this personally with my dad. Excuse me for a sec. You're dealing with a situation where not only are you heartbroken, but you're dealing with all the downstream effects on your life, as you talked about, and having to sell your home, where there's all those memories that you have on top of the art studio. You got the memories of your wife and your children there that you'd have to leave. That's horrible. And, you know, the last piece of it is that I could see from the reaction of the people sitting here, most of whom, if not all of them, don't know you. I could see the way they were reacting. America as a country doesn't want you to have to go through that. Not only because they could visualize themselves in the same situation, but because this country, one of our great attributes is we care and love for each other. And I could see watching folks listen to your story, that they were feeling for you. And so what we need to do as a country is to personalize these things. And a president can do that. That's one of the things that the president can do. So what I think, you know, one of the contributions you can make is, if I win this thing, I want you to help me to tell the story, right? Because I can say it a lot of times, and hopefully I'll say it well, so I can convince people of the changes we need to make, but nothing is as powerful as listening to you get through that. And it's absolutely true. And so what I'll say to you is that having watched my dad go through it and now watching you, it's not something that I'll ever forget. And so we got to make some changes to that because our country is changing. We can't remain static. Our health needs are changing. And as I mentioned before in the response to your question on Social Security, if people are going to live, it happened to your wife tragically very young. It happens typically the older you get. And if we're going to have a society that our healthcare system and pharmaceuticals allow everyone to live longer, we're going to have to deal with these end-of-life issues much more acutely. And I think people in this audience understand it, and people who are watching and people around the country understand it. So I'll just tell you that I won't forget it. And if I'm there, I will work on it. And more important than that, we're going to pray for you. Thank you, sir. Hang in there.
Governor, thank you. I don't know how I can follow that.
Yeah, that's hard.
Yes. When you become president, or if you become president, there are many, many problems that you'll have to solve, big and small. Okay. And one of the problems I haven't heard a lot about, we talk about cyber. There are bad actors in other countries who are running organized call centers, who are scamming American citizens out of billions of dollars.
You mean that Nigerian thing isn't real?
No, it's not real.
Oh,
I know.
Man. Damn, I'm in trouble.
Yeah. And a lot of times it's at the elderly, senior citizens who are losing their entire life savings. So as president, what would you do to stop these bad actors overseas from stealing from Americans?
The interesting thing about that is that trend of that really started in the early 2000s. And the reason I remember it is because I was U.S. attorney at the time in New Jersey, and it was something that President Bush was really upset about. When it first started to happen in large numbers, and he was getting the reports of it, he actually sent out to all of his U.S. attorneys, all 93 of us, the fact that he was upset about this, and he wanted us going after these folks. And he wanted to make it a priority of the Justice Department to go after these folks. And we did. And I probably did, I want to say it was 40 or 50 of these cases just in my office of these folks. And we're able to reach them most of the time because they usually set up domestic bank accounts to take the money before they take it offshore. It doesn't go directly to a foreign bank. Most of the time it goes to a bank here and then goes over. So we were able to go through the banks, follow these guys, and get the money back. So it can be done. I think there's been a loss of focus on it. I don't think the Obama administration, the Trump administration, or the Biden administration has focused on it the same way that President Bush did. But President Bush, for whatever reason, and it's probably something like we just talked about with the gentleman that was over there. Did he leave? He probably heard a couple of stories from people and got angry. Knowing President Bush, I think he probably got really angry. And he called in John Ashcroft as Attorney General and said, fix this thing, John. Let's go, let's do it. So it can be done. We did it in the early 2000s and slowed a lot of these folks down and put them in jail. But crooks are smart. When you stop enforcing, they go back to doing what they were doing before. When the risk to being arrested is low, they go in there and do it. When the risk is high, they move on to something else. And so what I would tell you is that's one of the advantages I think I bring in having done prosecuting work for 7 years in the 5th largest office in the country, and especially the 5th largest office in the country, which is in New Jersey. We have great crime in New Jersey. We really do. We have such great criminals in New Jersey. And in fact, our criminals in New Jersey are so great, they make TV shows about them, right? We have really great criminals in New Jersey. And what it showed me was what you can do if you are focused on fighting it. Prosecutors can make an enormous difference in this country in those quality of life crimes that you're talking about. So you can be sure that someone who did those cases himself, on his to-do list for my Attorney General will be to crack down on that, because I saw it can be done. We did a good job of it across in a unified way. The FBI set up special task forces to give us the investigative tools that we needed to do it. We used the Department of Treasury, the Secret Service. They don't just do protecting the president. The other part of their job was financial crimes. So we used Secret Service and we used the FBI to investigate and give us the information we needed to be able to prosecute. So it would be a priority for me because I saw that it worked. And I also got, in a couple of instances, to actually have the people who had gotten stolen from in and able to return their money to them. And when you have that experience even once, to see the look on the face of a senior who had $70, $80, $90,000. The one I remember was, it was $90,000. It was a 83-year-old woman. And when we called her to ask her to come to the office, she thought she was getting bad news. And we slid a check across to her and said, we seized the money back and we got it. And she just burst into tears at the table. And she said, now I don't have to sell my house. When you see that, you know, those moments in government come few and far between. And when you see it, you don't ever forget it. So that's what we would do. Yes, right back there.
Thank you so much for spending the evening with us here.
Thank you.
And what a great setting.
Yes.
What a gorgeous place. So you've been very successful at making really good decisions throughout your life, becoming governor. If you were to teach all of us here a couple of points on how to make better decisions, what would you say to us?
That's a heavy burden. I mentioned earlier that, like, I think I've become the person I am in large measure because of my parents. And I would tell you, one of the lessons that both my parents taught me, and my mother said it, but my father reinforced it, was my mother used to say to me all the time, Christopher, be yourself, because then tomorrow you're not going to have to try to remember who you pretended to be yesterday. It was a great line from my mother, and it really made me remember my whole life about that. So first thing in decision making is be true to yourself. Like, don't try to be something that you're not, and let your decisions be driven that way. Understand who you are and make decisions that are consistent with who you are. And sometimes they'll be popular and sometimes they won't. And sometimes they'll be right and sometimes they'll turn out to be wrong. But you need to be true to yourself. Second, I would say take a breath. Most of the bad decisions I've made in my life, I made really quickly. And I didn't recognize it at the time. I recognize it now that I'm older a little bit more, but I was making an emotional decision, not a thoughtful one. And when you make an emotional decision, you have a greater opportunity for it to be wrong. And so the decisions I made in my life where I made it really quickly and emotionally, that oftentimes turns out to be a problem. So take a breath before you make a big decision. Take a walk. Talk to somebody else. Get advice from someone you trust. And even whether you listen to that advice or not, the process of going through it gives you the time to really think yourself, to go back to that first point of being true to yourself. It gives you time to think about, what do I really want to do? Third, I'd say take risks. Don't always make the safe decision. The safe decision is not only the best one, the safe decision is not always the right one. And I've taken risks in my life. And the risks that I've taken in my life haven't always worked out. But when I look back on them, the decisions that I truly regret are not the decisions that I made to try for something, to risk something, and it didn't work out. The ones I really regret now that I'm 61 is the risks I decided not to take. And now I'll never have the chance to do it again, because age and time just take options away from you. So take risks. And the fourth thing I'd say is, when you're making a really difficult decision, and I've made a lot of them in my time as U.S. attorney, deciding whether to charge someone with a crime or not, and when I was governor for all kinds of things, you need to take some time alone at the end. When you're in a leadership position, you're going to have lots of people who are going to give you advice. Some that you invite and some that you don't, you know, like the newspapers and TV and all the rest will say, you should do this, you should do that. If he doesn't do this, he's this kind of person or that kind of person. I think you should listen to all the advice you can get, even the stuff you don't want, but then don't let it be the last person who's in your ear that determines what you do. Because then you're just leaving yourself to luck and hoping that the last person turns out to be right. When I had to make big decisions, in both of those really responsible jobs that I've had in my life. Before I made a decision, I'd ask everybody who was in the room to leave the room. So like, okay, I got it. Thanks for your advice. Good. I'll let you know what I'm going to do. And then take some time by yourself to not be hearing anything else except for what's going on in here. Because that moment makes you understand, in my experience, two things. One, that all the advice in the world is just advice, and you have to make the decision in your heart and in your mind. Two, what it reminded me of even more importantly is I'm responsible. And when you know you can't blame anyone else for your decision, man, you really take it seriously and you take the time to make the right one. If you got everybody buzzing around you and you go, okay, well, this guy says this, all right, I'll do it, go ahead. And then it goes sideways, you go, well, I'm not listening to him anymore. Obviously, I got bad advice there, but not my fault. If you remember, it's your responsibility. These decisions are your responsibility, whatever they are, whether it's about your job or about your family, whether it's about something bigger than that, because you get a bigger job, a bigger responsibility. It's about your church or your synagogue or your mosque. It's about, your kid's school or whatever it is. Remember, it's your responsibility. Your decision is your responsibility. And I think it grounds you then and says, okay, I'm going to do what I think reflects best on me as a person. Won't necessarily always be right, but you'll be able to decide, look, if folks understand that I did the very best I could, I made the very best decision I thought I could, and I took the time to be responsible for it, and when it turns out to be wrong, that you admit it. That gives people confidence in you, because nobody thinks anybody else is perfect. And everybody in this room has made decisions I suspect they wish they could take back. And so if you approach it with the same kind of purpose, then even if it goes wrong, you'll have the ability to be able to recover from it. And other people will understand because they believe you made that decision based on what you thought was very best at the time and not motivated by anything other than being responsible for what you do. So that's kind of the way I make these decisions. And I think, whatever your time alone, whatever you do during your time alone that works best for you. Some people meditate, some people pray, some people, just think back on past experiences to try to be informed. But that alone time is really important in the end. And in some of the biggest decisions I've made in my life, I've done that. I can remember, when Hurricane Sandy hit our state, and the first morning after the storm, getting briefed about all the things that happened. We lost 346,000 homes in 24 hours. There were, no operating water treatment or wastewater treatment plants anywhere in the state. Every major highway was blocked. Every school was closed. 2/3 of the state had no power and wouldn't for a long time. When they present you with all that stuff, I teased Mary Pat that night when I got home after my first night as governor in the middle of a disaster. She said, how did it go? And I told her that story, that they briefed me about all this stuff. And then when they were done briefing me, they all shut up and they just looked at me. And I said to her, now I know I'm governor. Because they're like, okay, dude, what are we going to do? Those moments where you have to now decide, what direction do I take 9 million people who are out of their homes, many of them, cold, sad, lost everything that they owned? What do I do? When that happened, I got up, I left the room, and I said, I'll be right back. I went back, I thought, I came back in, and I said, here's what we're going to do first. A lot of those decisions turned out to be right. Some turned out to be wrong, but all of them were considered really carefully, and that's the way I deal with it. Thanks. It's a good question.
Going back, you mentioned about the gentleman was asking the questions about the, different crimes going on and things. Okay, as being head of the executive for the federal government.
Yep.
There's a judicial branch that you must deal with
Mhm.
that enforces the laws that are made for this country. So I just want a little bit about your opinion on the judicial branch.
Do
in
you
the
mean
country.
the Department of Justice or you mean the judges? Which ones are both?
Both.
Okay.
Yep. Where's it going? Because, you know, there's an awful lot of crime that goes on, and you arrest people, criminals, and then they're back out on the street.
Right. Well, let's talk about a few things. We have a crime problem in this country right now because people aren't doing their job. Prosecutors are deciding they're social workers and not prosecutors. If I'm president of the United States, prosecutors will prosecute. That's their job. That's what I did when I was a prosecutor. That's your job. Your job is not to be a social worker. We got social workers. But when you commit crimes and you're a prosecutor, your job is to determine what are the facts. Do the facts prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the person committed the crime? If they do, you charge them, you try them, and you send them to jail if the jury finds them guilty. And that's your job, and that's it. And all across major cities in this country right now, prosecutors are getting elected who think they're social workers. And that's why you have the crime in New York and Chicago and San Francisco and Los Angeles that you're seeing right now, because criminals get it. They're going to the places where they're going to get cut a break. So what I would do as president is I would tell my attorney general, in the states with those high crime rates, we send FBI and the U.S. attorney's offices in there, and they prosecute the street crime. And we got plenty of room in federal jails to put these folks who are committing these street crimes in jail if the locals won't. And I'll embarrass them into doing it, because that's your job. And no one is calling it to task on this. And this is one of the things where Biden has been the biggest failure, is he has allowed there to be unrest and disorder in our streets. You see people just going in to stores and just clearing off the shelves and walking out. And there are no ramifications for it. You see businesses in our major cities just closing because it's cheaper for them to close than to stay open because they're being robbed. And what's going to happen, and is happening right now, is something that's bad too, and it's going to be vigilante justice. I saw a video the other day of someone going into what appeared to me to be a Korean bodega in one of the cities, and a guy went in there and took a garbage can and was just taking stuff off the shelves and dumping it in the garbage can to walk out. And he turned his back at one point, and one of the owners of the bodega had a bat. And he just started beating the guy. You saw it, right? He started beating the guy senseless, right? Well, that's not the kind of world we want to live in either, right? Where like you got people thinking that they have to do it and can do it. And if you're a prosecutor, what do you do with that guy? Like, you're really not supposed to be beating people senseless with a bat. That's against the law. But he's getting robbed, and we didn't do anything to stop it. The guy's losing his business and his livelihood. Someone was stealing my livelihood, I'd beat him with a bat too, right? So, that's why on that piece of it, there has to be clear law and order. And since I'm the only person on the stage who's ever done it, you can count on the fact that not only am I sensitive to it and will pay attention to it, but I know how to do it and when it's being done the right way. And that's what I'm going to insist happens when I'm president. And I think on the bigger issue, the broader issue of judges, here's what I learned as governor. Now, in New Jersey, the governor appoints all of the judges. All of them. There's no elections of judges. No one else gets to appoint judges. I got to appoint all of them. Senate has to confirm them, but I get to appoint all of them. Let me tell you what happens with judges. When someone wants to be a judge, they love you. You're the greatest leader they've ever met in their life. And it would be just an honor to serve. And when I get there, I am never, ever, 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 ever going to forget, Governor, I'm going to act the way you think judges should act. And then they get confirmed. And they get lifetime tenure. And then they believe that their appointment was a virginal birth. Politics? What politics was involved in any of this? You are who again? I'm the guy who appointed you. I don't remember you. And quite frankly, it's inappropriate for you to be talking to me about this, Governor, because I'm now a judge. That happens. So what you need to do, and what I would do in picking judges, is not believe anything they tell me and just look at what they've done. Appoint people based on what they've done in their lives and their careers, and count on the fact that 90% of the time, that's the way they'll act when they get there. And don't, because I listen to some of this stuff, and she'll tell you, like, we go crazy about some of the people. We'll see them at Christmas parties now, whatever, who couldn't leave us alone, couldn't stop ringing the phone, couldn't stop sending people my way to get me to appoint them. And now we see them at a Christmas party and they're like, can you move out of the way? I need to get to the bar, right? Like, no, I'm the guy who actually made your career right here, me. Oh, yes, I kind of vaguely remember you. So you can't count on what people will tell you during this process. We need to appoint judges who have a proven record of doing the right thing in their life. But I'm talking about if I was president as a federal judge, the federal judges that I appoint, right? I can't worry about each state because I can't do anything, as you rightly point out. But as the president, I will appoint a lot of judges on the federal level, both trial judges, circuit court judges who do the appeals, and the United States Supreme Court. And I will apply those same standards to all three levels. Show me what you've done, and then I'll decide whether you're worthy or not of my support, not what you're telling me, because I lived that one. I believed it. And I got burned a bunch of times by some people who got there and kind of went a totally different direction. So yeah, that's one of the challenges for sure. But on the crime issue in our streets, the FBI and U.S. attorneys are going in there, and they're going to clean up the streets and enforce the laws until these state folks get their heads back about them and understand that the first job of any government is to protect the safety and the property of the people you serve. And they've forgotten that. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Governor. My name is Andrew Moore. I'm from Tamworth, New Hampshire. My father, he's a small business owner in Massachusetts. He owns his own auto mechanic shop. And right now he's by himself. You know, he's overworked. He can't find American citizens who are able to do the work or even willing to do the work. But on a consistent basis, he has undocumented immigrants coming to him who have the knowledge and are the willing to do the work. Okay, but he can't hire them, even though he wants to. He can't afford to put his business at risk. And I think regardless of where you are, whether you're on the left or on the right, there's an understanding that the immigration system in the United States is broken, right? So as president, what plans, I guess, do you have in order to make it better?
You know, I've been asked the immigration question a bunch of times in these town hall meetings, and I'm never asked in that context. It's always like, what are you going to do about the southern border? Which is important. I'm so glad that I called on you and you asked that question, because people don't talk about what the effect of 6 million open jobs in this country is. It's not just that it's not just adding to our economy, it's also the impact it has on the folks who need to hire somebody, and the impact it has on their lives and their ability not only to grow their business, but just to like go home and get some sleep. Right. And so what do we want to do about the immigration system? If you listen to the debate on Wednesday night and they asked Governor DeSantis about this, his solution to the entire immigration problem is shoot them stone cold dead at the border if they have a backpack. Did you hear that line of questioning? It was incredible. I thought, okay, well, he's going to back off now, right? Stone cold dead if they got a backpack. We'll figure out whether they have drugs in there or not. When? Like after they're dead, you open it up and you go, oh, no drugs in there. Oh well. You know, but if we get 1 out of 3, we got a good record, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's a complicated problem. So let me give you a 5-point answer of what I would do on immigration. Part of it was what I said to the young man who was sitting there. He's off now to a Nikki Haley town hall, I believe. So good luck. God, thank you for coming. I would send the National Guard to the border to help our Customs and Border Patrol officers. I would add 10,000 Customs and Border Patrol officers and put them in as they're getting trained and deployed, and move National Guard out as they're coming in. Third, I I would double the number of detention beds we have at the border so that we can detain people. Right now we have 38,000 beds total, 200,000 illegal encounters a month. Like, the math doesn't work, so we need more. Fourth, I triple the number of immigration judges because we need to get those hearings moving quicker than they are. Right now, you got to wait 4 years for a hearing. So what happens is someone comes in illegally, they say, okay, come back here to El Paso in 4 years to have your hearing, where we might kick you out of the country. They go, yeah, sure, we'll see you. They're not coming back to El Paso. The fifth part is the part that addresses what you're talking about. 6 million open jobs in the country. I would have an immigration system where you look at where do we need help, and the people who have those skills go to the front of the line. We need to have people fill these jobs. And we've done this at every other point in our country's history, where we have had merit-based immigration when we've needed jobs that were filled. My great-grandfather came over here on that kind of program in 1901 from Sicily. He's a stonemason. And in New York and New Jersey then, they were building. And they didn't have enough qualified masons in the country to do it. So they put the word out to Europe, we're going to you can come now if you want, if you show us that you've got the skills to be a mason. Now, the funny thing about that story was that when my grandfather, my great-grandfather and great-grandmother got their ticket to come here, my great-grandmother was 9 months pregnant. So my great-grandfather said, I'll go over to America first, you have the baby, and then come afterwards. My great-grandmother was a very smart woman. She said, no chance. I'm not letting you go over to America by yourself, dude. I'm coming with you. And so my grandfather was born in the boat on the way over to America. And it was one of his proudest moments. He used to talk about it all the time, that I used to ask him, I called him Poppy. I said, Poppy, like, what's the proudest moment of your life? And he said, my proudest moment of my life is the day I don't even remember. I was 4 days old and I got to Ellis Island and they made me an American. We, in all this arguing about immigration, have forgotten that folks who really want to come here will be proud to be Americans. They're dying to be Americans. And we need to give them the tools they need to come over here. So let's go to a merit-based system where people have to come here, they have to learn the language, and they have to pay their taxes. Because that's the way you feel like an American, right? If you speak the language, and the minute everybody can commiserate about their tax bill, you're an American, right? And we're not having that kind of system right now. We need to give E-Verify for all the employers so that guys like your father can know that they're not putting their business at risk when we have this new influx of people. So he can have a system where he checks. This person gives me a social security card or some kind of work visa. I can plug it into my computer, check it. If it comes back that it's legal, then I can hire him, and I've got protection against any kind of government action against my business. We need to do that stuff. And we also need to be able to give something to the Democrats in return for getting that. Democrats don't want a merit-based immigration system. Democrats don't want E-Verify. And so they dig their heels in and they say, no, we're not giving it to you. Well, Republicans haven't generally wanted any breaks for dreamers or any path to citizenship for some folks who are already here. Guess what? To get this done, we're going to have to give them something like that. And you need a president who's willing to make the deal. Everybody's afraid because it's going to be unpopular in some quarters. But you know who it'll be popular with? Folks like your father, who are now going to be able to hire somebody who's competent, qualified, and ready to work so that he can go home every once in a while and sleep and not have to worry about turning down jobs or closing his business down. And we haven't had those kind of changes to the immigration system in 40 years. But Reagan did it in the early 80s. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than what we had. And it lasted us for a good 20, 25 years until the problems started to crop up again. And Reagan made that deal with Tip O'Neill. We need to have a president again who's not afraid to make a deal with the other side on something that's difficult and to compromise. It's not a dirty word. But in today's politics, compromise has become a dirty word. We can't have it because it leads to the things that you're talking about, real life effects on real people. And so I'd be willing to make those compromises, because it would get something good for the country in return is something that I agree with philosophically as well, which is merit-based immigration and E-Verify to be able to protect small business owners from being hurt by hiring people that are illegal and then have the government come after them and fine them and do all the other things that would really hurt their business. I learned this because I had a Democratic legislature for 8 years in New Jersey, right? So if I didn't make deals, I would have just sat there and played cards for 8 years, right? I mean, it wouldn't have anything to do. You've got to figure out how to forge that compromise, and it's hard work, but it's what you get paid for, and that's what we would do. So take that back to your father and tell him. Okay, it's a little bit after 8, so I can take 2 more questions. I'm going to go to you now. Now, this is your second town hall and your second question, but you look ready. Are you ready? All right, let's go.
So,
How many town halls have you been to?
I've only been to one.
All right, good. This is your second to mine, right?
Yes.
Yes, all right. Let's go.
So there's it feels like there's traffic everywhere, right? You have both sets of my grandparents. One set lives near LA, and one set lives in New York City, and I have been in my mixed share of terrible traffic. So do you support further high-speed rail developments? And will you continue the work being made under President Biden? And will you make sure that there's less traffic on the roads and we get fast electric trains like in Europe or Japan?
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet the next Secretary of Transportation. Definitely better than Pete Buttigieg, I can tell you that. Definitely better. You know what? This kid is so damn smart because we have 2 daughters who went to the University of Notre Dame. One who's there now and one who graduated from there in 2018. And you're right. We've been to South Bend a lot. The roads stink. They got potholes everywhere. They kill you in South Bend. You're right. This kid is definitely going to be Secretary of Transportation. I can't wait for you to meet with Buttigieg during the transition. It's going to be great. You can tell him the roads stink in South Bend too. All right. So I come from New Jersey, which is, there's traffic everywhere. Everywhere. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Meeting was? Yeah. Hackensack, yeah, it stinks. Yeah, I agree with you. All right, so let me answer your question. On rail, yes. In fact, I worked really hard when I was governor to make sure that we had a new tunnel system between New York and New Jersey for train traffic, that we build a second tunnel because the train traffic's too slow between New York and New Jersey. And by the way, those tunnels are used for the trains coming from Boston all the way to Washington, D.C. And it's the most traveled train track in the United States. So we need to do that. Now, I wouldn't put high-speed rail everywhere. Correct. Although, for all the people out there in Kansas who are listening, that was his position, not mine. So we need to look at where the traffic is the worst. And you pointed out 2 of them, Los Angeles, Southern California, and the New York metropolitan area. And we need to make sure that we have our mass transit there available, not only to avoid traffic and to lessen traffic, but also to help our environment a bit too. Get more cars off the road. That'll help a little bit. And, my wife used to take the train every day. Yes, NJ Transit, absolutely. Into New York City, where she worked on Wall Street. And there are 2 things about the train. One, she liked it because she got to read her newspaper, which she couldn't do if she was driving. But she didn't like it because it took so long to get there. And when I became governor and New Jersey Transit became my responsibility, and she was still taking the train, she would come home and say, your system stinks. I don't know what you're doing, but you got to do better, buddy. So we can invest in that, and we should. But we also, in other parts of the country, have to make sure that our bridges, our tunnels, and our airports get modernized. And now they've passed a bill to spend a lot of money to do that. Mr. Buttigieg, your predecessor, has not done a great job in getting that money out the door and getting things built, but we need to modernize. When I travel overseas, like recently when I went to Israel, I stopped in Dubai first because no one was flying directly into Israel for obvious reasons. So we went to Dubai first. You look at the airport in Dubai, it makes almost any airport in America look ancient. We're not investing enough in those things. And for people who have to travel for work or want to travel for pleasure, we need to have better airports, better roads, bridges, and tunnels, in addition to high-speed rail in the places where there's really heavy congestion for traffic. So yeah, I support that. I supported it when I was governor. I supported the bipartisan infrastructure bill, not because I thought it was perfect, but I thought it was better than not doing anything. And I wish that Mr. Buttigieg would start getting the money out there so we could actually start seeing some of the results of that vote that people made to fund it. But you knocked me out, man. I'm going to be in Londonderry next Wednesday, so come back. You could be on a third one. All right, so I can take one more question. Let me go to the guy in the back right there.
Hi, thank you. You'll be pleased to know that I have been to one Nikki Haley.
Thank you.
And this is my fourth.
Fourth for me?
Yeah.
Excellent. He's the winner of the evening. He'll be getting a door prize.
But in keeping with the New Jersey aspect of like getting straight to the point, numbers are not trending up for you. The combination of you and Haley would be a very powerful ticket. Would it not be better to better serve the anti-Trump vote for you to suspend, but for Nikki to have you as a VP declared before the January primary?
Yeah, I don't think so. And just let me.
But that's dividing the Trump vote, the anti-Trump vote.
You're basing that decision on polls right now that show her at best 4 points ahead of me. So for 4 points, which may be right and may be wrong, as you've watched polls happen all the time in our country, you're reading stuff in the newspaper where media writes she's trending upwards. She's 25 points behind Donald Trump. I'm 29 points behind Donald Trump. I don't know whether that's really trending upward for her.
Combined, you'd be in mid-30s.
Right, which would still put us 10 points behind Donald Trump, based on the polls right now. Look, I'm not going to make a decision based on polls. I'm just not, because I don't believe them. If you believe the polls, Hillary Clinton would be in her second term. If you believe the polls, Ben Carson would be the nominee from 8 years ago. Right now, at this time, put yourself back 8 years ago. Right now, Ben Carson was 10 points ahead in the polls. And you would have been asking Donald Trump, you think you should drop out to team with Ben Carson because he's ahead in the polls? And as you put your numbers together, you guys could win. This is not a political science experiment.
Now, 8 years ago was a different matter for myself. It was not till 2020 that I became a citizen. That was when I was
right. But I mean, no matter what, I use you as an example.
Yeah, I know.
But it could be anybody standing in your chair making that argument. Look, I absolutely, in my heart, believe I'm the best person to be president of the United States.
I love what I hear. I love what I hear, but it's the numbers.
And I don't believe that the numbers are anywhere near final. We're almost just a little short of 7 weeks away. I think most of the people in this state haven't anywhere near making up their minds yet. And in fact, if you look back to 8 years ago, 50% of the people who voted in the New Hampshire primary, and this is after they voted, said they made their decision in the last 3 days. So why would I make a decision 7 weeks out to abandon something that I've worked this hard on the hope that every person who was going to vote for me would vote for her? Why would we assume that? You're saying every one of my numbers is going to get combined with hers. Well, I don't know that would happen. You don't know that would happen. Some of those people might go and vote for DeSantis. Some of those people might say, you know what, I'm not voting because I don't like her and he's a quitter now and gave up, so I'm staying home. We don't know that. And so my point is, we want to stop Donald Trump. You know who can stop Donald Trump? You. And you, and you, and you, and you. By deciding not who you think is going to win based on the polls, but deciding who you want to win, who you think will be the best president, and go out and work and make that person the winner. We can do that. And I just, all of this is based on polling. Your whole premise of your question is based on polling. Well, hell, then Donald Trump would have quit after Access Hollywood. Because after Access Hollywood in 2016, there was not another poll that showed him winning. And I'm telling you, because I was in the room then, they were making the argument to him that you're making to me. They said to him, drop out, let Pence run for president, and we can maybe then still beat Hillary Clinton. But if you stay in, based on the polls we see, you can't possibly win. Guess what? We know what happened. And that was, Access Hollywood happened less than 4 weeks from a general election. And so, look, I just don't buy it. I don't buy it based on my experience in this business. And I don't buy it because, quite frankly, I don't know, if you went to a town hall of Nikki's next, your second one, and you asked her, are you going to pick Christie to be your vice president? Or would you accept vice president for Christie? She'd give you the same answer I'm giving you. I'm confident of it. I haven't asked her, but I'm confident that Nikki would say she thinks she should be president. And she would also say she wouldn't commit to making me vice president.
Sure.
Right? So I understand the sentiment of it, and I understand that media drives it, because I had an interview before I came in here, with a media member who was like, well, what do you think about maybe just dropping out and supporting Nikki? Like, no. My answer is no. And Omar, stand up and take credit from CNN. Omar, the guy who asked me that question. Thank you, Omar. But look, here's the thing. I would have more inclination to do that if Nikki would speak out against Trump. But she doesn't.
Fair enough.
Okay? So what confidence do I have, should I have, that if I pitched this and got in league with her, that she would stand up and finally stand up and say he's unfit?
So that's her next step.
I have no confidence. Well, you're going to be waiting a long time for that one, because she's playing for 2028, man. I'm telling you. All right, she's playing for 28, and she doesn't want any of the people who are supporting Trump right now to be angry with her. So if I say nothing, they won't be as angry as they are at Christie, because they're angry at Christie because he's actually saying something, right? If you're worried about people being angry with you, you have no business, in my opinion, running for president. And I'll tell you one thing Trump's not worried about. He's not worried about who people are angry with him, is he? He says whatever the hell he wants to say, however he wants to say it, and nobody's going to him and saying, you've been an incredibly divisive figure in this country. More than half of the people in this country don't even like you. Why don't you drop out, Donald, and spare the country from another one of these fights? If you were standing here and you asked him that question, exactly what he'd say. We need to have someone who, and I said this the other night at debate, the reason I'm the only person who can beat Trump is because I'm the only person trying to beat Trump. All the rest of them are trying for something else. I'm not running for first loser. And DeSantis and Haley are running for first loser. That's what they're running for. I'm running for president of the United States. Thank you.
Thank you.
But thank you for the question. And I think that also, beside me being vice president, she needs to commit to my man here as Secretary of Transportation. We would go as a package deal, right? Package deal. All right. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for spending your time on a Friday night to be here. It is Friday, right? Yeah, sorry. The hell if I know. I think it was Friday. Thank you for spending your time on a Friday night here with me. I really appreciate it. And I want to leave you with one message before I go. And it builds off of his question. Nobody in this room has an excuse to accept what the media and the pundits are feeding you. New Hampshire doesn't whisper. New Hampshire doesn't accept the inevitable. New Hampshire knows that they get to decide. Uniquely from every other state in the country, you get to decide. You're not victims. In this business of politics, there are two types of people: victims and perpetrators. That's it. New Hampshire are perpetrators. New Hampshire are the people who make things happen. And in New Hampshire, it's not just registered Republicans. It's undeclared independents who can make it happen too. And I hear people all the time telling me, we don't want Trump Biden, we don't want Trump Biden, we don't want Trump Biden. Well then, damn man, let's finish the job early. The Democrats are not going to do it. They're not even voting here. He doesn't want, he's lost so many times up here. He don't want to come back. He's run 3 times up here. He's 0 for 3. You got to give him credit at least for that. He's like, shoot, I'm not going 0 for 4. We're skipping New Hampshire. You can end this by ending Donald Trump's political career on January 23rd, because I will promise you something. If I beat Donald Trump here on January 23rd, it's over. When he starts to bleed, he won't stop, because the American people know in their hearts he's unfit. They know it. But a lot of people are scared. They're scared to say it out loud. You see it on the debate stage with people running for president. Imagine what it's like. I had a woman in a restaurant here 2 weeks ago. I walked by the table as I was leaving the restaurant. She grabbed my arm and she said to me, keep doing it against Trump. Keep doing it. You got to do it. And I said, I'm going to, but why are you whispering? And she said to me, because my friends don't like when I say bad things about Trump. Now, you know, I understand that. It's the arguments we were talking about before, the incivility around dining room tables and stuff where people don't want to have the argument anymore. He has divided this country so badly that people in New Hampshire are whispering their opposition to him. But when you go into the voting booth, you don't even have to whisper. You just have to fill it out. And your voice will be a roar. A roar. And I don't believe these polls. I don't. If I did, I might agree with you. I don't believe them. I believe that what's happening in this country right now is the exact opposite of what happened in 2016. In 2016, you didn't see one poll with Donald Trump winning, not one in the general election. The exit polls that night had Hillary Clinton winning 360 electoral votes. I was on the call. I heard it. You know what that means? They didn't only lie to the pollsters before the election, they lied to the pollsters as they were after they voted. They walked out, they voted for Trump and said, oh, I voted for Hillary. Because it was politically incorrect to say you were for Donald Trump in 2016 against the first woman ever to be nominated for president of the United States. And he just had the Access Hollywood thing, and nobody wanted to admit that they were going to vote for him. But guess what? Lots of people who said they weren't or didn't, did. And he won. I think in the very same way in 2024, inside the Republican Party, it is politically incorrect to say you're against him. And lots of people just say, oh, yeah, I'm for Trump. Good. Okay, good. And then they're going to go in that voting booth and they're going to vote for somebody else. And they're never going to tell a soul that they did. At the dinner table, they're going to say, oh, he got screwed again. I don't know. Who didn't vote for him? I know I did. Everyone else did. They're all going to say it. And then they're going to have that little twinkle in their eye. Bang. Right? That's what New Hampshire can do. And I'm here for that purpose. I don't want there to be any doubt in anybody's mind. He is a danger to this country. He is unfit to be president. He is here only to serve himself and not to serve you. And he said the other day in legal papers that the president of the United States does not have the obligation to support the Constitution. He said that the oath says preserve, protect, and defend, not support. And let me tell you something, he believes it. And he will act that way. And if that doesn't chill your blood as an American, I don't know what will. And it's not me making it up, and it's not some soundbite. You go on the internet and look for it. His lawyers said it in legal papers on his behalf. The president does not admit he has an obligation to support the Constitution. Well, let me tell you something. I am not going to stand by or give in to somebody like that. And when I took off after him on Wednesday on the debate stage and no one else would, my gift today is for him posting on Truth Social about me again. And what a loser I am and how awful I am. Man, I know I'm making ground. I know I'm making ground. Because he always tells you this. And believe him when he tells you this. I only spent time on the person in second place. Right? He beats the crap out of DeSantis, right? In Iowa. He goes to Iowa and he beats him up. I will guarantee you, when he comes here and you go see him, right, on the 16th, he'll be beating me to death. He'll be saying all kinds of bad things about me. I'm ready for it. You be ready for it too, because what it tells you is, I'm coming. And you make it happen here, and we will end his political career and end this part of America's history. And history will look back on us and say, thank goodness for the people in New Hampshire in 2024 that they put an end to Donald Trump and his division of this country and putting himself before the people who he should have been honored to serve. It's time to end it, and it's time to end Joe Biden too, because you know what? He ain't up to this job either, and he needs to get out of the way as well. It's time. You're going to make it happen on the 23rd. I will be here every week between now and then asking for your vote. I asked for it tonight. With your support, we're going to win this thing. Thank you very much.